One case that I'll never forget is of a young woman who was 7 months pregnant, who was walking down the street, and she was grabbed by family planning cadres, dragged off the street, strapped down to a table, forced to abort the baby that she very desperately wanted. And in the end, one of the medical personnel came to her with the body of her aborted baby and said, "You need to pay for this so that we can dispose of the body." And she said she didn't have any money, so they just laid that body right next to her in the bed. And I've got a photograph of her looking down and just grieving the loss of this 7-month-old baby that was forcibly aborted.
She has long sounded the alarm about China's one-child policy. It's been called the world's largest social experiment. She calls it a gendercide. Here with the latest is human rights activist and president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, Reggie Littlejohn. Reggie, great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
This is nearly 35 years old this year,
That's
this
right.
one-child policy. What is the problem, and why hasn't the world taken notice of so many missing girls?
Well, there is a twofold problem here, Raymond. First of all, there is the issue of government-enforced forced abortion. So they have this one-child policy, and it means if you have more than one child, if you don't have a birth permit, you will end up with a forced abortion. And the Chinese Communist Party boasts that they have prevented 400 million lives through the one-child policy. So China is unique in having a governmental enforced coercive low birth limit. But there's also the issue of gendercide, the sex-selective abortion of baby girls. So people feel that if they can only have one child or two children at the most, they want their only child or definitely one of their two children to be a girl and a boy. So they selectively abort the girls.
In 2013, the Chinese government tweaked the one-child policy, which allowed people to, if you had a girl the first time out, you could have a second child. How did that affect society, and what was the outcome there?
In the countryside, if your first child is a girl, you can have a second child. And most people see that as their last opportunity to have a boy, and that's where the gendercide happens. The most vulnerable people in China are the second girls born in the countryside. And there are 9 provinces in which there are 140 boys born for every 100 girls born, and 2 provinces in which there's actually 190 boys born for every 100 girls born on that second child.
How has this changed Chinese society? And what is it setting up?
Well, because of the sex-selective abortion of baby girls and the preference for boys, China now has a very critical gender imbalance where there are at least 37 million more men living there than women. And what that has done is it's provided the driving force, the engine, if you will, for a tsunami of sexual slavery, not only in China, but the surrounding countries as well.
Wow. So, and they're importing people from other countries, women from other countries?
Yes.
To mate with these, to marry these men?
There's forced marriage, and then there's just sexual slavery. And yes, women are being seduced and trafficked across international borders. Many women are told, we're going to get you a great job in China, you're going to work in this wonderful factory, you're going to be able to make money, you're going to be able to send money home, and then they come over the border and then either they're into forced brides or sexual slavery.
I was surprised to learn in some of your research that China has one of the highest female suicide rates anywhere. It's unbelievable.
China has the highest female suicide rate in the world, and it's increasing. So at this point now, 590 women a day are killing themselves in China.
Wow.
And it's possibly the only country or one of 2 countries where the suicide rate for women is higher than men, and in the countryside it's 3 times the number of women as men kill themselves.
Where are the women's groups on this? Why aren't we hearing more about this? Forget abortion or certain rights. Why aren't we looking at this as just the extermination of women for being women?
You know something? I agree with you. It seems to me, and I challenge the pro-life community has really embraced my message. I challenge the pro-choice and the women's groups. If they are pro-choice, they should be jumping up and down against forced abortion. If they care about women's rights, they should care about the selective extermination of 200 million women worldwide. If they care about women's so-called reproductive health, why don't they care about 200 million forced sterilizations of women in China?
Why don't the leaders in China repeal this thing, given all of these unintended consequences that we're seeing all around?
Well, yes. The one that we've talked about is the gender imbalance. The other one that we haven't talked about yet is the aging of Chinese society. Yeah. So they started this whole policy because in the Mao era, there was a very high fertility rate of almost 6 kids per woman. So they instituted the one-child policy. Now it's down to about 1.5 children per woman. But the problem is that population explosion under the Mao era is now heading towards retirement, and they do not have a young population to sustain it. So the problem in China is not that they have too many people, it's that they have too few young people to sustain their elderly population and too few women. So why do they keep the policy, as you ask? In my opinion, and this is what I testified about today, China is keeping the one-child policy because the one-child policy is keeping the Chinese government in power.
How so?
Because in the beginning, I believe that it really was a population control measure and that the terror of forced abortion was a byproduct. At this point, it makes no demographic sense whatsoever for them to keep the policy. So why are they doing it? The Chinese government is a brutal, totalitarian regime, and the one-child policy is a way for them to demonstrate their power and intimidate everyone. It's a way for their arm to reach from Beijing into every single womb in the entire nation of China and declare life or death over the baby that's in there. And that is a way that they can keep it's basically social control masquerading as population control.
It's terrifying. Your organization has a initiative called Save a Girl.
Yes.
Tell me about this. It's already launched in China. You're soon going to be branching out, or you just have, in India. Tell me about the program.
Well, our Save a Girl program is, we have a network of field workers on the ground inside of China, and we actually have connections in the community, including even in the local hospital and some of the clinics, where when a woman goes in and has an ultrasound and knows that she has a girl and has scheduled herself for an abortion because she's a girl, or when she's given birth to a girl and we find out that she's being pressured by her in-laws to abandon that baby girl, we will actually go to her door and say, please do not abort, please do not abandon your baby because she's a girl. We will give you a year of monthly support to help you, to empower you to keep your daughter.
And you're working through local people in country, in China.
Exactly, right. But it's a way for people in the United States to extend a helping hand directly to the door of somebody in China who is being really coerced. There's a strong correlation between gendercide and forced abortion because gendercide is almost like family or culturally enforced abortion. To help a woman who is carrying a girl and everybody's telling her to abort her, to say, no, don't do that. She's a precious daughter, and we will give you financial support to help you keep her. And we have a very high success rate.
Reggie, for you, I know this is not a concept or a theory. This is something that is a daily part of your life. You have 2 adopted daughters from China. Tell me about that, how that happened and what this has meant to your life.
There is a very brave and famous activist in China named Zhang Lin. He is a former nuclear physicist who gave up what would have been a life of privilege to demonstrate for democracy in connection with the Tiananmen Square pro-democracy movement. And for that reason, he was jailed, tortured, and his health has been broken. They've broken discs in his back. They've tromped on his hands because he's a blogger and a writer. And when they could not silence him by directly jailing and persecuting him, they actually went after his 10-year-old daughter, Annie. And when she was in 4th grade, she was kidnapped out of her elementary school and detained overnight. So she's known as China's youngest prisoner of conscience. And then they didn't allow her to go to school. They put her and her father under house arrest. They escaped and became fugitives. Then they were caught, and when they were caught, her father knew he was going to be going back in detention, so he got word out to me saying, please help. We want Annie to come to the United States because she can't lead a normal life in China. So with the help of Congressman Chris Smith and very brave people in China and the United States, we were able to get Annie to the United States. And now my husband and I are raising her and her older sister as our own daughters.
Wow, unbelievable. How long have you been raising
They came
girls?
in September of 2013. So we've had them for about a year and a half now. And Annie has gone from somebody who doesn't speak any English at all to her first report card as a straight A student we just got 2 days ago. And her sister Lily is turning 21, and she's gone from speaking very little English to actually she's learned to drive, she's passed her GED, she's got her job doing real estate, and she's on her feet and ready to become independent. So we're very proud of both of our girls who are the daughters of Zhang Lin.
Two girls you've saved, certainly, in a big way. Before I let you go, we saw earlier in the program the Pope this week had this international confab at the Vatican with the UN to really embrace an agenda for climate change, and he's asking the global community to put restrictions on carbon emissions and to really raise this issue up as a moral concern. Do you have any concerns, knowing what you do of the UN and the way it operates? Do you have any concerns about the broad embrace of this climate change initiative?
Well, you know, I'm glad you asked that. I'm an outdoors woman, and I'm all in favor of the environment. I believe that we should protect God's creation. However, I think that the Pope needs to be aware of the fact that that issue and the fact that everybody has an emotional response to natural beauty can be corrupted into actually a bottom line for a lot of people, which is a lot of the people who are driving this climate change are actually really what they're into is population control. So, for example, how does that have anything to do with China? There was a climate change summit in Copenhagen.
That's right.
And one of the top leaders of the Chinese Communist Party's Family Planning Commission got up there and said, proudly, we have prevented 400 million lives from being born, and this is our contribution to the fight against global warming. And most of that was done through forced abortion. So we really have to guard against viewing human beings as walking carbon footprints. We cannot fall into that trap.
Yeah, and this declaration that humans contribute to and are the reason for climate change, which was part of the joint declaration this week, concerning?
You know something, I would have to really do a lot more research on the science for that. I know that there's been a lot of discrediting of that position in the press lately. But what I will say is this, in terms of human beings causing climate change, the Chinese Communist Party is rapacious. I'm telling you, they are rapacious towards the environment, and they will do things like dumping cadmium right into rivers, et cetera, et cetera. So they say, oh, we've done this great job helping the world by eliminating 400 million lives, but they have no controls, and so to me, it's not a matter of depopulating the world. It's a matter of being sensitive in the way that you use the environment. And also, you know, I would challenge some of these people who are the top climate change advocates. How are they living? What kind of resources are they using? Yeah. How many jets are they flying where they want to go somewhere and they use a whole jet to get themselves there? How many rooms are in their household? You know, I just think we need to look at that as well. Yeah,
and not always focus on the population as somehow being a parasite on the earth. Reggie Littlejohn, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You can learn more about Reggie Littlejohn's Save a Girl initiative and find out how to help by visiting womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org.